A few interesting observations about the Amish. Hi, welcome to today's little lesson, which is a continuation of yesterday's little lesson. And we asked the question, are Amish people Christians? And I hope I satisfactorily answered that. I said, of course, just because you're Amish doesn't mean you're a Christian. But if you believe in Jesus Christ, that he's the Son of God, and there's some evidence in your life that you believe that because you're obeying his commandments, well, then you're a Christian, no matter, even if you have some other false doctrine or funny doctrines. And I think the Amish do. But I'm not just a theorist in this or a distant observer. I'm a very close observer. I've been spending time in an Amish community off and on for a long time. And I'm actually in the process right now of having an old barn that I inherited from my late dad, and having it repurposed and remodeled into a place where I and my wife intend to live. So, and it's right in the heart of an Amish community. It's, several thousand Amish folks live, within a certain circumference of where I'm going to live. And I've hired Amish carpenters and Amish guys to work for me on this remodel. And so I've gotten to know them quite well, and I've gotten to love them, I have to say, very, very much, and appreciate them. They're Amish because they were born Amish. That's the story behind 99.9% of all Amish people. And they all descend really from just a few families, way back in Germany, I guess about 100 years ago, or 400 years ago rather. And one interesting and actually tragic fact about the Amish is because of their genetic legacy of all being related. If you go far enough back, it results in a lot of children being born with birth defects. And that's kind of a curse that's on the Amish people for their exclusivity, because they are a tight-knit group, and you're not going to visit one of their church services unless you're Amish and so forth, and you only get so close. Although I've gotten real close, I would say, to my Amish friends, and we spend time together. We've had meals together and so forth. I've been eating at their house; they've eaten at my house. But I'll say this much: I tried to hire some Amish carpenters, roofers, to come and put a new roof on the house where I'm filming this right here. And it's a couple hours away from the community where that barn's being remodeled. And my Amish roofer friend said that, he could come and do it, but it would be about a 4 or 5 day job, and they'd have to go home 2 hours. They'd have to come 2 hours to my house and every night go home 2 hours. And I said, well, can't you just stay overnight with me? He says, nope, that's not allowed. I guess there'd, be some potential temptation that might go with being away from one's family, which is it's a good, wise thought. But the Amish take extraordinary precaution in order to avoid sinning. That's why most of the old order Amish would never own a cell phone, because I asked my friends that, and they said, well, cell phones today are just like computers, and you can get on the internet and search the web. They know all this stuff, and you could, potentially view pornography on your cell phone. Well, they're right about that, and so they avoid that temptation by not having cell phones. And it causes all kind of problems because, if you want to communicate with an Amish person, you got to go find him physically. And I even put it out to my Amish friends, to their wives. Their wives complain. I go to see my Amish friends, and their wives say, my husband's not here. Where is he? I don't know where he is. Because they're out doing stuff, and they wander around all day long doing their business, and they come home. And the wife has no idea. Well, okay. You can roam around, and if your wife doesn't know where you're at all day, I suppose you could be tempted to do things you shouldn't do as a husband then too, couldn't you? I even told them that jokingly, that there's applications you can get now that you can know where your husband is all the time. You just look on your cell phone and there's the map and it'll show his exact location. So it could be said that one could avoid sin by having a cell phone. So my Amish friends also don't own cars. And it's funny because I've asked them a question about that, because they come to my barn and they use my hand tools, my electric hand tools, my saw, and drills and so forth, all plugged into electricity. Of course, they don't have any electricity. They use them all day long. And I have a 1953 Farm All Cub tractor that they drive around on my property to pull, wood and so forth. And if there's a backhoe sitting there that someone's left, they know how to operate the backhoe. They can hop right on that backhoe and use it. And so I suggested to one of my Amish friends, how about, because I have to pay for someone to pick you up every day and bring you here. It's costing me money because you don't believe in cars and it's too far for you to come with your horse and buggy. How about if I just I'll buy another car, an old car, I'll park it at your house and then you can just use it to drive to my place and back to do work every day. In the end, it'll save me money, And he said, oh no, we can't do that. And I said, well, why not? You use my power tools every day. I know you don't own any yourself, but you use mine. You don't own a tractor, but you use my old ancient tractor. You don't own a backhoe, but you'll use a backhoe if it's right here. So and he said, well, we have to draw the line somewhere. And he said it even in a way of, he himself doesn't understand why these lines are drawn, because they don't own cars, but they come to work every day in a car driven by a non-Amish person. And they don't have electricity, but they use electricity all day long. They have to in order to do their jobs. Okay, so those are interesting facts, and I think it, I love these guys. I love the Amish. I don't believe that in order to get to heaven, you have to shun cars and electricity. And I do think it's a little bit funny that anyone could say it's wrong for us to own something that it's okay for us to utilize if it belongs to somebody else. None of them have phones, but all the guys I know have to use phones. And so they'll, go to someone's house and can I borrow your phone and talk on the phone? One of my Amish friends there's a phone in a little phone booth across the street. And it's a landline, it's not a cell phone, and he can use that to call. He has to pay every time he does, right? So just kind of funny, and I don't think I'm ever gonna persuade them to change because there's just so much pressure upon them, to conform, and they're trouble if they don't conform. All right, well, that's all for today. I just thought you might find some of those facts interesting as you gaze upon those Amish buggies in your travels. Thanks for joining me. God bless.